He had a flip chart. He basically said, I want you guys to relax. You're going to have input in how we do things. We still have to do our jobs compliantly, and we have rules and everything to abide by. We all know that. But within that, I want you all to take ownership in how we do things. And I'll just oversee and manage, and if you need help from me, I'm here to support you.
Welcome to the Workplace Theater Podcast, where we explore the joy, the pain, the comedy, and human connections that make up the world of work culture. In this episode, our guest, Voc Walters, explores the impact of a positive work culture and the role transparency plays in the process. Our hosts, Chris, Michelle, Joe, and Julius, share their insights and experiences while offering practical advice on navigating workplace culture. So sit back, grab your popcorn, and let's dive into the fascinating world of workplace theater.
All right, so we are here at the Workplace Theater Podcast again. Welcome, everybody. How you guys doing today?
Great. You?
I'm doing pretty well. Joe, good?
Sun's out. It's a beautiful day.
Okay, good. How was your drive?
Not as painful as I thought. So it was pretty pleasant. I'll take it.
Okay, good. So today, our topic is creating a positive workplace culture. And so, Voc, thank you so much for joining us today, of
Thanks
course.
for having me.
Normally, what we do is we'll start off with a headline, right? And we'll just kind of get the conversation started. And Michelle always does the honors. So, Michelle, what do you have for us today?
Yeah, I try to pick headlines that are relevant to either our theme or, we all kind of have this commonality of human-centered engagement, being big human fans. So there was something that I read that I found really fascinating, and it was about how people in a crowd, like if you look at a festival or, a busy intersection or just anything where it's a chaotic crowd, there's no places designated for people to go. Mathematicians have found that people actually do form patterns that can be mathematically predicted. So even without the directional signs or someone telling you go this way. And what they did was actually follow some of the same mathematical principles that are part of particle physics, Brownian motion. Like if you look at dust motes in light and how you can predict how those will move, the same principle was applied. So it's sort of we know that there's laws of physics that govern how particles and gas molecules move, but what they're finding is that those same kinds of rules might be hardwired into us as humans. So I'm always fascinated by the difference between what are we doing that we think we're choosing and what are we doing that's actually just sort of hardwired in.
Ooh, wow. Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
The machinery at work
goes right into something I was thinking about as I was reading up on some of this, and we'll get to that.
Yeah. Well, what? Yeah, please. What are you thinking?
Yeah.
I'm afraid to jump ahead.
It's okay.
Putting
Go
the
ahead.
cart before the horse. Because,
okay.
One of the things we were talking about here is if a positive workplace is something that can be manufactured or is it organic?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So once we get there.
Okay.
So would you rather me wait? Or?
Yeah. No, it's okay. It's okay. So. Right. So your observation was essentially that do things just happen automatically, right? So organically. Okay.
Exactly. So that's what she mentioned about.
Yeah.
These things happening. Is that done on purpose or is it just happening?
Right. I think there's the gradations, right? So completely organic. Maybe intentional, and then forced,
right.
So, and even the organic, I think it just kind of calls into question, is the organic driven by us just going with the flow when we kind of realize that flow can be predicted? Yeah, that's sort of an interesting.
It's funny because, unfortunately, and unfortunately, you said the magic word, which is festival, right? So,
exactly. I thought of you.
Yeah. So I start thinking about the actual design and layout, because you can design you can create a layout to where you already understand how people are going to flow because of the way that it's all designed, right? Which actually, kind of goes back into one of our other podcasts with James, right, Christian Scott, about the actual workplace environment. That's interesting. It's interesting that they actually spent time to figure out what people actually would do.
Yeah.
But I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at all.
Just from your observations of how those crowds are acting, yeah.
Yeah, and how, again, I think environment, the way it's all laid out, you kind of understand where people gravitate. Now, what social circles and stuff are formed within that, that's another part of that, and that's kind of interesting as well.
Yeah.
Which is true, but as a whole, the flow of something, I think people tend to, the whole herd mentality,
Yes.
this is the way it seems to be flowing, they're going that way, so I'm just going to follow.
Exactly. People act different when they're in the crowd versus if they were just walking down the street themselves, and like how we're all influencing each other. What I think what's fascinating about this is we're influencing each other in ways that we can see, but probably some ways that we can't see.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you, going back to the festival, I guess it also depends on how familiar you are where you are as well, right? Because if you go into a festival, maybe the people who get there early, the first thing you want to do is go straight to the stage, right? Whereas if you're in a nightclub, as an example, since we talked about nightclubs earlier, if you're in a nightclub, maybe the first thing that you're going to do is go to the bar, right? And you're waiting for everybody to go to, and maybe in the workplace, if it's your first day, I don't know, or sketching, go to school or anything like that, it's, I don't know. That's
Where are the bathrooms, right?
yeah, go straight to the bathroom. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's interesting. Well, okay, I'm interested to see how this all connects. As we start to get to the burning question, which leads us to the next segment. So, Michelle, why don't you read the burning question?
Yeah, so, and we kind of touched on it a little bit. So the burning question is, can a positive workplace culture be achieved through intentional efforts, or is it something that simply can't be manufactured and only emerges organically? That interplay between the structure and the organic.
So we're going to toss that to you, Voc. Now you can go ahead and share your thoughts.
So my first initial knee-jerk answer is, I say both.
Okay.
Come into play there. I don't think it's one or the other. So I think once the intentions are there, the trust needs to go along. And then once all of that starts to happen and the trust comes, organically you start to kind of open up. You start to relax. And all of that starts to affect your entire environment. And if everybody gets on board, it's even better.
Mm-hmm.
So give us a little bit of context. So, Voc, you've had an illustrious, career in various industries. So tell us a little bit give us a little context, like for the listeners, like how you come to that conclusion based on like the experiences that you've had with your different jobs.
Okay, so I'll start by just telling you brief Cliff Notes resume. So I graduated college in '94. And during college, I was doing telemarketing just to make money to help me
Rough.
get through.
That's rough.
Yeah, so I was on the phones. And if you think about the early 90s, some cell phones, but we didn't have cell phones. There were landlines. So what was the big thing then? Call waiting, call forwarding, caller ID. So that was when I was doing calling homes, trying to sell those services. You can imagine how many times I've been hung up on in my life.
Yeah, I mean, I always thought about like telemarketing in general as like sales boot camp. If you can do that, you can pretty much do anything.
But here's the great thing, right? So you're selling them a service that if they had the service, they would have known not to answer the call. Oh, sorry.
Great point.
We didn't know that benefit then.
That's so
It
true.
only came later.
Where were you 30 years ago when I needed you?
So go ahead, Voc.
So I did that through college, and once I graduated, they offered me a supervisor spot. And I stayed down in Charleston, Illinois, I went to Eastern Illinois University, stayed down there for an extra year being a supervisor, and I had a team of telemarketers. My first management experience, basically. Left there, went to Walgreens as I moved back to Chicago, was an assistant manager. Rough gig. Excuse me. But left there, went to Enterprise Rent-A-Car, which is probably the basis of everything else I got that taught me a lot about just business and dealing with people, dealing with employees, and dealing with all of it at the same time. Mm-hmm. I mean, management is, you're in the middle of everything. You have the customer at you, you have your bosses at you, and you have your employees, and you have to manage everyone. Right, one of the hardest positions is middle management in any company. You know that.
You're here.
So,
Agreed.
left there because I'd had enough. Got a branch manager spot with, at the time, Bank One. In the middle of that, they merged to Chase. Great experience. Again, I was managing people. Had no idea about banking. I had never worked at a bank in my life, but they hired me on the management experience and the sales. So I made it through for 3.5 years before I joined Boehringer Ingelheim Pharmaceuticals. Mm-hmm. 2007, so I'm 16 years into this. So I say all that to say I've had different experiences, nightmares, mm-hmm. and right now I'm living the best experience I can ever live, working in a company and doing a job / a career.
So where did you see kind of the differences? Like, I'm interested to know, how was that the culture in the telemarketing versus when you got into, say, completely opposite, which is like banking, right? You got banking, which is going to be, pretty quiet, right? And telemarketing, which is everyone's talking and,
yes.
Trying to convince. So how was that swing, and where were you seeing kind of the differences to kind of come up with both? And where,
So just like you said, the environment typically is the difference. Walgreens was probably the most different, where it's a retail store. You have people coming in and out all day long, and at times all night long, because I worked at a 24-hour store, the last one I worked at. If you have the basis of what management or sales or dealing with people up there, you should be able to do it anywhere. I say should. Mm-hmm. So I guess just being able to adjust to different environments and taking what I learned, the training and everything, and just applying it, but just, okay, this is a little different, but I can still do this way because I have more people to deal with maybe in my face, as opposed to, we can take a break and no one call for the next 5 or 10 minutes. Let's take a break and we can do that. You can't really close the doors of a Walgreens or a bank because you have your hours. Mm. As opposed to now, if I need a break, I could just sit in my car in front of a doctor's office and not go in for the next half hour and get some other work done or read emails. Mm-hmm. Just adjustments.
Mm-hmm. Got it. So, but when it comes to like manufactured or organic, like where along the way did you, how did you kind of develop the way that you think about this now? Like, at what point did you get, take us on that kind of journey?
About 6 years ago. After all of that, my current situation with my manager and the district that I'm in taught me that this could actually happen, because I had no belief in a positive workplace environment. I experienced something close to it at Enterprise Rent-A-Car. It was a pretty much of a family atmosphere in the region that I worked in, which was in the western suburbs. The home office was in Glen Ellen, and the surrounding offices kind of spread out to the northwest suburbs and the southwest suburbs. That was our home. And everyone knew each other in the region, from managers to area managers down to, they have a new trainee up in Schaumburg, and this person's name is so. We all knew each other because we went out after work for social events a lot.
Okay.
So it was a family atmosphere. So that was positive, but there were a lot of tense moments and negativity that went along with that job, which still, I think, outweighed the positives, if that makes sense. As opposed to now, when I'm experiencing, which started 9 years into my career with Behringer, there's very few negatives. And it's almost too good to be true at times. It's, I would say, probably 95% positive. And I mean, I don't know if you could tell, you've known me for a while. I'm way more relaxed now than I was before, when I was a little tense in the workplace. And what's even better for me with my experience is right before the manager in the district that I'm in now, I had the toughest experience in pharma with that manager and how he managed his team. We all were on eggshells. We all were stressed out every single day, just because of how he thought things should go. How he learned how traditionally a manager should lead their team and what he thought. It just was kind of a nightmare.
So, Michelle, you come from pharma. So can you relate to the kind of that tense environment, and what are those components that make it that way?
Well, Voc and I were on slightly different sides of pharma, but I think any of us who've worked in big business can kind of understand what you're saying. What I'm curious about is whether so first off, yes, I can totally relate, but I'm curious as to whether the boss that you have now created a structure that was different than the structure, thinking about sort of that difference between the structured and the organic. Did he create a structure that was different than the structure of the previous boss?
Yes and no. And my answer is that way because he allowed us to create the structure.
Okay, say more.
So day one, when he brought us all together, when we joined his team, we got in a room. He had a flip chart. He basically said, I want you guys to relax. You're going to have input in how we do things. We still have to do our jobs compliantly, and we have rules and everything to abide by. We all know that. But within that, I want you all to take ownership in how we do things. And I'll just oversee and manage, and you need help from me, I'm here to support you.
Yeah.
So we started, verbalizing things to him. He would write them down, and we helped design our own plan for how we were going to do things in the district.
Do you remember some of the things that you guys actually wrote down?
Yeah. So as far as one of the things, our managers do ride days with us.
What are they?
A ride day. So that's the only way they can evaluate us. Otherwise, we work on our own on a daily basis. I leave my house, I have a plan as to where I'm going to go that day to different offices or pharmacies or whatever, and then I go home and I do work at home. We don't see our manager every day. There's not a place to report to as far as an office, and you have a manager down the hall in his office. It doesn't work like that. So once a month, or maybe once every other month, however the manager sees fit, they go out into the field, ride in your car, walk into the doctor's offices, and as you're doing what you're doing and you're talking to the staff or the physicians,
They just pop up?
No, they're there, and they're basically taking notes or mental notes, and you get to the car, you debrief, they do an evaluation at the end of the day or two, and that's called a coaching report.
Okay.
So you start compiling those throughout the year, and then that goes into your
So,
overall.
and you guys requested that to happen on your board?
No, that's a thing that happens.
Okay.
What we requested was how often and how this was going to happen with him. And he was flexible enough to say, okay, I can still manage you guys. I can still evaluate you with how you want it to be done, which was, instead of doing 2-day ride days, which could be exhausting, we just do one, but you just do them more often, maybe once a month, instead of doing a 2-day ride day once every 2 months. Okay.
Okay.
And it was, I remember around the room, we're all looking like, okay, was it that easy? Hey, I want to raise. No, being funny. It was that easy.
He's like, well, we can work on your bonus structure.
But it was that. We also said, many of us that come from managers that really, really drove the spreadsheet thing. There's all these different spreadsheets. Every day you're tracking this and trackers and spreadsheets and trackers. And it's like, I'm spending more time doing that than selling because you need this busy work. And we all said, can we just not have trackers? Or if you need one, can we just, he said, done. It's just too easy, And to this day, I mean, there's one or two trackers that he was forced to do basically from above. Mm-hmm. One of them I take care of for the whole district. He just trusts me to do, like for instance, today is the 26th of the month. I have a calendar reminder to send an email out to the district to send me a certain number. I plug it into the spreadsheet, then I send it to him, make his job easier. Mm-hmm. Because I want to.
Ooh.
He didn't ask me to.
Okay, so this is the benefits of a great work culture here.
Yeah, because then now you get people that will want to do things for that manager.
Okay, so it's interesting that you said that. So I'm going back to you, Michelle, because you've shared in previously that the inspiration behind you all working harder was based on I think it was like kind of the patients are waiting, right? Which me coming from a marketing mind is like it's like that's a great way to get the work. Just it's like you're almost like it's true, but you're also like guilting your staff to work harder and harder and harder. I mean, when you know that the patients will always be waiting. So there's an interesting dynamic between what Voc said, which is based on just acknowledging and being flexible and understanding that we have value versus the patients are waiting, which is like, come on, let's get this kind of done. Mm-hmm. So when you listen to that, how does that make you feel versus...
Well, it's interesting because the patients are waiting phrase I found truly just like deeply inspirational, not as much as manipulative as it actually maybe could be looked at. But we also had a lot of managers, I would say 90% of the managers that I was lucky enough to work with had the same sort of, I've got your back, let me try to clear away roadblocks for you, kind of a mentality. What I really love about your story, Voc, is because I'm a big fan of democratic principles applied wherever they can be, is the way that your manager removed those roadblocks. He said, I want to hear how you would structure this. Let me hear what you're saying, and it sounds like almost everything you asked for, he was able to give in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
Or a modified version, yeah.
He did his best to, I guess, for lack of a better term, oblige to what we were asking.
Right.
So, Joe, from your workforce and workplace experience, like, democracy in the workplace, right? Like, when you listen to that, like, how does that resonate with you? In terms of like the path, how much it versed where there's toxicity, right? But then there's democracy. Like, how do you balance that based on what Voc was saying?
Well, so Voc, love what you said. First, I just want to acknowledge, like, you are the most chill top salesperson I've ever met. So there's something that's working there. But you just see, like, when somebody's relaxed, right? Like, what can they do? How can they perform? I've been in a lot of environments similar to your past where they're not. It's very. They're very intense, and and you're even if it's when I was at a place where the patients are waiting, right? It was like, let them wait. Like, that was kind of like, okay, well, that's fine. Let them wait. I have experience in the insurance industry. That's what you do, right? Like, there's only so many dollars that you want to put out the door. I'm going to guess, not reading that article, not seeing the science, I'm going to guess there's some environmental factors on how these things kind of play out, right? Like, we talk about music and rhythms, and you can, Julius, as an amazing DJ, right? You can change the way people dance and vibe based on how you change your music, how if you make the beat faster, you make the beat slower, you bring in some different elements, right? And so my assertion here is that if you have a toxic environment, that toxic environment is going to create more toxicity, right? We have a friend our health guru, that's like, if you're out of balance, you're going to keep doing those things that keep you out of balance, right? And so even, you don't really have a choice but to try to curate something. But we're running into our situation here, so I don't want to give too much, but just those you can't really push forward if you're not on a good foundation, right? Like, imagine Chase walking in and saying, hey, we're going to let you guys do what you want to do, but not being authentic about it, or, coming back 6 months later and saying, well, we gave you guys the opportunity and we don't have the results, we don't have the numbers, because they're not necessarily supported, right? So there's ways that you can, if you just bring in an approach, but it's not foundationally sound, that it'll go sideways, right?
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true. And that's why my manager said, I still have to manage you guys. We still need to do what we need to do. As long as we do that, and sorry, maybe I didn't say that before, as long as we have results, as long as we're performing, we're going to be fine, and we can do things this way. We're okay.
Yeah, created like a container. And you also mentioned about some of the regulations you need to follow. So, there's a container for it. And then within that, allowing that the humans who are doing the job to say, here's what I need. Here's what I need to allow me to perform well within these structures. Yeah.
So, how was it that you weren't scarred, from being in so many, like, being, the toxic environments leading up to that, right?
It was.
Okay. So you were.
We all were.
Right. So then, how long did it take your team then to, to, I guess,
really relax and kind of go along.
And so this is the real deal.
I would say it was different for each one of us on the team. Me, probably a little sooner than others. But then some people on the team probably took maybe a couple of months, 2-3 months. I have a close colleague who's very pessimistic in nature, and she's always looking at the downside and very skeptical of people. And it took her definitely longer. She's like, this can't be, no. I'm still going to think about it this way. And I think it probably took her 2 or 3 months to really I think this is going to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
And now 6 years later, does she still work with you?
No, she got promoted.
Okay. So, but how did that change? Like, before she got promoted, how did her mindset change? Was she less pessimistic? Was she more trusting, enthusiastic? Or?
She was way less pessimistic when it came to our manager.
Okay.
Now, outside the scope of our district and you go above, she still had
concerns.
Absolutely, which was near valid. Mm-hmm. Because he can't control what happens. I mean, and this is another thing, and I'll say this has something to do with our work culture, is he's an incredible filter. Mm-hmm. And I know because he, trusts me a lot, and he confides in me, and he'll can't tell me everything, of course, but he filters a lot, and he takes a lot of heat because of his management style from above. What's saved him a lot is
The production.
yes.
The numbers. Yeah. When you get the results, it's hard to argue with the way when you get the results.
Absolutely.
I was thinking about filters a few weeks ago. I was in Arizona. We got a lot of citrus fruit, and just like the setting on my juicer, right? Like how much pulp do I want to let through, right? And some people can handle the pulp, and some people don't want any, right? And so I was just thinking about filtering and how that works with people, and like how do you like from my management style, from my leadership, like I give I'll let people drink from the fire hose, right? Which not everyone wants to drink from the fire hose. It's not appropriate. So having those filters and having those, being able to filter it, your information, your communication, the right way to the right people is paramount. I wish I had that kind of, magic wand to be able to do that. That's why I have Julius.
So I keep talking about toxicity because I'm interested to know, with trust being at an all-time low in the workplace, right? I'm interested to know, were there times where something happened, right? And maybe you gave the benefit of the doubt, but it potentially could have been a red flag for what was, going the route of or going the direction of a, toxic environment, right? Because you're starting to get to know this person. So were there any of those times, right?
Are you speaking of my current manager?
Yeah.
Yes. And I think I understand the question.
It's basically, so just to be clear, I think people are scarred. And the moment that there's like going to be red flags, like, oh, here we go again, right?
Yes.
But turned out it wasn't a here we go again, right? Because of the environment that you were in, but it could have easily been seen. So, yeah.
I can give you one in particular. So, again, the industry, we unfortunately go through periods of times where there's layoffs. Like sometimes with my company, recent years, it's been almost every 2 years we're going through a restructure and people are getting cut, which is incredibly scary. We are of the mindset that management knows about this ahead of time and they just don't say anything to us. We just don't know what level of management knows ahead of time. We know that the vice presidents or people, maybe the regional directors may know, or zone directors, and the higher up you go, they probably know months in advance. They may be talking about one now that's going to happen a year and a half from now. But our direct managers, some people think they know. And in actuality, I believe more today that they are probably filled in at the last minute right before us. So, the first time we went through a layoff with my current manager, it basically slapped us in the face the evening before. We got an email around 1:30 or so, conference call at 3. Tomorrow morning, don't go in the field, sit at home and wait for a phone call, and your manager's going to let you know if you still have a job or not. That's how quick it happened. So now you're like, okay, I was thinking all of these good things, and now is it true, or now I don't know anymore. Having conversations, and after everyone was saved on our team, we were fine, which was indication number one, he had our backs.
Right.
We're good. Business as usual the next day. No one took a loss. Everyone's fine. And he talked to us about how it all went down. And as we were all kind of thinking it, there were other managers that got cut. He stayed. And he said, the proof of what I'm trying to tell you, the point I'm trying to make is we didn't know either. We were on the chopping block too. So then it eased our fears. Like we were believing, and then, oh, wait a minute, and it calmed us back down again. And then I had a personal conversation with him later on, one-on-one, and he explained some other things that he really didn't feel comfortable telling the rest of the team at the moment. And that was where the kind of the speed bump came. I started to kind of revert back to old thoughts, and then it calmed me down, and I was like, okay. And I think after that, my faith in him got stronger. Because I guess, in a way, I had to be proved that what I was starting to think was wrong.
Okay.
Yeah, something that's interesting, being somebody that's had to lay people off and having information way in advance
Yes.
for many different things and many different reasons, and having to be, sometimes that person that makes those decisions on like, hey, revenue, we're projecting revenue is going to decline by X percentage, which means everything else you have to reduce your cost. We're not going to take a loss just because, just because we want to save everybody's job. But one of the things that always bothered me was the notion that you can't say anything, you can't divulge any information. And we do that. We say that because of legal ramifications, right? If you tell somebody something and you let something slip that shouldn't have slipped, and then all of a sudden there could be legal recourse, so that the adages don't say anything. But what ends up happening is this mistrust, right? So if you're somebody who likes to build relationships and build trust and have that faith in people, have that environment where people are, they're inspired to do things for you that you don't even have to ask them to. It's probably the hardest situation, right? Because you do have a legal responsibility, but there's when people are informed and people have an understanding of how things work, they'll work so much better, right? And I was thinking about this morning because I'm deciding if I want to get involved in a situation or not that might have me. I might need to testify on something, and I'm just thinking about the whole situation that this person's in as a win-lose situation. Either somebody wins because somebody else lost. And it's not a win-win situation. And, Voc, as you described it, is your manager is creating a win-win situation, right? Even in the face of adversity, right? It's like, this is what's going on. Let me inform you guys. So if we know what the rules are, right, we can win even when the odds are against us, even when things, it looks like we might lose or somebody might lose, we can still win because we know what the rules are, right? And sometimes that can mess with, the establishment and things that, it's like, well, you're gaming the system. Well, no, we're just operating. We know what the rules are to win, so why not?
And that's what my managers had to deal with from above him throughout this entire time. Meanwhile, the way he's managed that, been an incredible filter. He got incredible buy-in from us as a team into him and what he's trying to do.
So do you feel like, first of all, kudos to your manager. And
Thank you.
I'm saying thank you to your manager because, you always have a smile on your face as I, over these years and I'm like,
and
why
I'm relaxed.
Yeah, relax, totally chill. So do you feel like you're kind of, because you walk into doctor's offices or whatnot, do you then notice like the red flags in work culture when you're walking into a bunch of different, like how quickly does that happen? And does that mess up your sales or does that,
No, you could feel tension in an environment. I do. And I've walked into offices on some of their worst days, and I'm like, let me just hurry up and get the heck out of here, doctor. Yeah, it's not, I can tell.
What are the indicators that, that pop up for you?
Looks on people's faces, silence, even though it's not silent. It may sound weird, but you hear noises, but it's still silent. I know that sounds very crazy.
No, it's like angst almost.
Yeah. So you look around, you see that, And especially if I'm used to a lot of my offices, not all, but a lot, once they got to know me and they see my personality when I walk in, and because I try to be a certain way, it was natural. I'm just
Jovial.
anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a friendly person, I think.
I think so.
Thank
Based on your smile, yes.
Thank you. They feed off of me, I feed off of them. So when I walk in, it's, hey, in this conversation, how's it going? And I talk to the entire staff. I don't just say, I need to see the doctor. And now I don't have a relationship with the receptionist or the MA. I do what's called in our industry a total office call, but I'm not making it a call. I'm actually developing a relationship with everybody, or everyone that's open to it, put it that way. And then you walk in a day and, hey, Voc, and it's things going on, and you see, and it's like, okay, I'm taking some cues here that I need to probably make this a quick one. And I'll even say, hey, is this a bad day? Should I come back next week or Thursday or something? And if times I'm like, yeah, maybe. Okay, I'll come back and I'll see you guys later. I try to have a good rest of the day. And they appreciate the respect that I had some type of emotional intelligence to figure out. I probably need to get the heck out of there.
It wasn't going to be a good sales day anyway.
Yeah. So, but then I'm sure you guys notice there's people that will stay and they're on their own agenda and they're going to get what their job is and they're going to get it done that day and they don't care.
I'm here this day. I don't want to come back. That's going to be out of my way. This, that, and the other.
So now you're, as a rep, that person's on their own agenda and they're going to keep going. And then the doctor's busy, and they're still going to stand there with their visual aid, and they're going to go through the whole spiel, and it's the worst possible day for that. And now what you're doing is, the next time they see you coming, they're going to remember that. Like, I don't want to deal with this today.
Yeah.
Well, and it's just thinking about the culture that your leadership creates, right? If it's spreadsheet driven, right, and it's like, so, Voc, you were supposed to be at Dr. Smith's office.
You go right into what else.
And you didn't, you didn't sell any units today, right? Did you do your presentation? Right? And it's like, if it's that granular, it takes the humanness out of it.
Thank you. So if you don't mind, I'm not trying to cut you off, but so you fed right into what I'm saying. So the manager before was all about that. A manager now, that could happen right in front of him on a ride day. And he trusts the fact, I remember the first few times I'm walking out, it wasn't a good, he said, Voc, you don't have to explain. I'm proud of the fact that you recognize you had some emotional intelligence and you figured out what's best for you in your office and you got out of there. Great job.
But your manager's ringing up like, ding, 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 another one. This guy's like amazing.
He said, just because I'm with you today in doing this, don't mess up your relationship to your offices just because I'm here.
So instead of getting, dinged for it, you're getting praised for it, for using your judgment. Yeah, we had something.
That's what I'm talking about.
We had something come up where we were using algorithms to determine how frequently we needed to visit offices for monitoring, right?
Yep.
Clinical trial monitoring. And back in the day, you'd go every 4 to 8 weeks, or it depended on how frequently the visits the patients were having. But you, as the monitor, could determine how frequently you had to go based on, well, this place only has one patient. They're super professional. They've got it all together. I can go every 16 weeks here. This place also only has one patient, but it's a hot mess. I need to come every 2 weeks.
Right.
And the algorithm kind of took that away. And so we had a discussion about, there may be some newer monitors who don't have the feel for that and could benefit from the algorithm. But you have some seasoned people who definitely don't need the algorithm and shouldn't really be penalized for using that emotional intelligence and using the vast knowledge that you have of the situation you're walking into.
So I'll ask you this question, Michelle. I'm glad you said that. Is it that a new monitor doesn't have that feel for it, or are they just driven by what they were trained to do? Because we're all people, we're all human.
Yeah.
If we're in a social setting, you pick up on those cues in a social setting? Why can't you pick up on them in a professional setting?
Yeah.
But if you're fearful and you're told this is what you need to do and you're driven, now you're conflicted on how to
It's
act.
a great point. It's a great point because it does come down to how they were trained, right? So if they were trained to prioritize the frequency, we're all going to get in trouble if we don't do the frequency, versus taking in the whole situation so that they too could kind of develop that feel, now you have a different situation. Yeah.
Michelle, go be a human. Don't be a robot.
Right.
Basically.
Yeah.
Well, and just the measures too, I think, on how people are judged, because this is a great Gen X conversation, right? But when you start getting into millennials and Gen Z, right, it's not having that understanding of what is the actual target, what's the actual goal, right? It's very prescribed by, all right, so I need to do these things, and this is what it is, and I did it, I did my job, get off my back. You don't have the results? Well, I went and I followed the rules.
Yeah.
Right? Without having that understanding of why the rules exist, but it's kind of the way that they were brought up, right? If you follow the steps, you'll get the result. And if the steps are wrong, that's not their fault. It's not their problem. Somebody else told me what to do. I did what you told me to do. Otherwise, otherwise, I'll just do it myself. I'll just figure it out myself.
Yeah.
Because then I'm not worried about you yelling at me.
It's like what you measure improves, right? So if you measure, did you check all the boxes on your list of things you had to do when you walked in that day, including talk to the doctor and all the different things? Or is your measurement on how is that relationship going? What's the long-term growth that we're seeing in the development of the business at this place? And it's easier to just put the spreadsheet into the hopper and check it off that way at scale. It's harder unless you have a really great manager like it sounds you have, or maybe a more sophisticated. You could even measure that in a more sophisticated way if there was the intent to do so, to really try to measure the right things. So yeah, for those newbies, if you're measuring the right things with them, sometimes you break it down so easily, so basically into a check mark system that they're really not getting the big picture,
You're right.
Yeah.
Jules, I think that's why human-centered engagement is so important, because we can start to see where there's that miss in the check system, the checklist, right? The checklist is missing things, right? And then we can actually use human-centered engagement to train people on how to identify those human things to find out what's wrong, what's the difference, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm not seeing a lot of people trained in relationships, because we never had to train people in relationships until the computer age, right? Until the internet came.
Yeah.
And now you have to train people in relationships because
It's true.
you're sitting at a console typing away, like messaging, no emotion in the message, right? Unless you do an emoji. But even that, we can have fun with emojis.
And I just want to say, for anyone listening who knows me, I love spreadsheets. I love checklists. So I see there's a place for both. So just to be authentic and say, I do use those tools.
And there's nothing, I agree, there's nothing wrong with them at all. I think we were at a place before my current manager that we were inundated with.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
And it took time away from selling and doing what we were there to do. To the point where I found myself doing busy work at 9 o'clock at night when I'd rather be watching TV or going to sleep. And 9 to 5 is over. I'm still late at night, either reading emails and then trying to input things into a spreadsheet just to satisfy management. And that's where, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's too many and too much.
Yeah.
And how did you wake up the next day?
Not happy.
Tired?
Not
annoyed?
Not as relaxed, not as happy to go out and do what I do.
So let's throw another, before we get to the situation, let's throw another dynamic into it. And I want to talk a little bit about built-in biases, right? Because this also may play into work culture, right? Yep. Being an African-American man and having a lot of experience, how was it that you were able to I guess manage your own biases, right? In having another manager, who may or may not be your same culture and your team around it. How did that dynamic play, as you were, as you were moving into like your new position right now?
Okay. So, whether it's positive or a negative, this is just who I am. I tend to be probably a little bit more on the optimistic and trusting side in life, period. I'll give everyone a chance until I'm proven otherwise. So it kind of starts there, really. I gave that opportunity, I gave that chance, and I could feel and pick up on my new manager's genuineness almost instantly. Even though I still had like, I don't know, this is kind of against the norm. I still felt who he was as a person almost instantly. And I think a lot of us can do that. I mean, sometimes do we get fooled in life by people? Absolutely. I mean, I think it's happened to all of us. But most of the time, I think what you pick up on a person usually kind of sticks to close to the truth. And so it wasn't hard for me with him because I felt who he was as a person minutes after he walked into the room.
So in the past, in maybe when you were under management that, was not him, in more of a toxic environment, were there times where, especially if we talk about bias or racism or whatnot, were there times when where there was no racism and it was just toxicity, but then the group started to make it more than what it was? Like in how?
You mean started to form it into something maybe?
Yeah,
maybe.
Sometimes, right? Sometimes someone's just a jerk,
Yeah.
right? But then your biases go one way and then you make it into something it's not, and then it turns into, right?
As far as my personal experience, I'm going to say no, because since I've been working in the professional world, I've always been the minority in the room. So I haven't had that lynch mob crew to, hey, what this is going on, this is bad, and start to join in and start to think like that. Until probably 2 years ago, I was the only African American in my district for about 4 years. And then I had districts before where I was the only one. Enterprise Rent-A-Car in my region, I think I was at one point one of 4 in the entire region. In my region now, I think there may be 6 or 7 of us out of 4 states. My point being, no, I really haven't had that type of, because I've been a minority most of the time.
Got it.
Even in the workplace.
Okay, awesome. So we're going to pose you a situation, and we're all going to talk about it, but
Okay.
since you're the guest, we're going to...
You go first.
Yeah.
So imagine a company has a toxic work culture with high turnover and low employee morale. Not like we've ever been there before. The new CEO wants to implement a plan to create a positive workplace culture, but faces resistance from some employees who believe that the toxic culture has become ingrained and cannot change through intentional efforts.
Okay.
So, and how would you address this challenge, and what strategies would you recommend to create a positive work culture?
Well, the first thing I have to say about that, it's all points back to trust or a lack of in management. So let's just start there. And I think the new CEO needs to spend most of the time, his or her time, in the area of building trust that probably was never there. Tactics and how to do that, is that what I mean? That's probably countless ways. I mean, first, I think if it were me, I'm going to go around and visit and have one-on-one conversations with each employee. And I don't care how long. It might take me the first 6 months of my new stint as a CEO, but if that's what I'm trying to accomplish and I go have one-on-one, and I mean, Julius, if you're one of my employees, let's just go in the room here. You're not going to get fired. You don't have to worry about your job. Tell me exactly what you think. Are you going to trust it at first? Probably not. No, Julius, really. This is off the record. What is your perception of how things are going or have gone? And if you had to change one thing, what would it be? And you start compiling that information over time with each employee. And pretty positive, I'm sure you can attest to this. Out of a list of 20 things, maybe, most of the employees they're going to be a top 3 that everyone says.
Yeah.
So now you take those top 3 and maybe deal with those. It's just now it becomes a little easier because those top 3 are going to be the biggest ones. And if you fix the biggest ones, and now you start to get the trust and the buy-in, the other ones will become a little easier on the list.
Michelle, what do you think?
I think it makes sense. The listening tour to start things out, they always recommend that, right? So your instincts really make a lot of sense to me there. And there was a book by Stephen Covey Jr., or the second or whatever, who was talking about the speed of trust is the name of the book. And it talks about just how people feel like it's going to take years to build trust, but it really is about consistently doing what you say you're going to do. And so you've basically just laid that out. I understand, I hear you, what the problems are. Now I'm going to solve those problems for you best I can.
Right.
You know, and having the transparency, which you didn't mention, but I know that's just kind of your nature based on some of the stories you've told. If you're not able to execute all of those solutions based on the situation you've got, you're still earning the trust by the transparency. So yeah, I think it really rings true.
I mean, even if everything can't be solved, or you know what, you guys said this is where we were, you guys want to be here, I can't get you here.
Yeah.
But I can get you here.
Yeah. And
everyone sees some type of compromise and some type of effort instead of saying, nope, can't do it, so we're just going to stay there.
Yeah.
Even that compromise, even that effort to get us halfway means a lot too.
Exactly. And I think that what you're describing is, and why people tend to react well to how you've laid that out, is it involves vulnerability. You're not the CEO coming in, guns blazing, I'm going to leave my mark. I'm going to remove barriers for you to leave your mark, employees who know this field and know this business very, very well. So that also stood out for me, and I think that's a really key thing for all CEOs, all business leaders to really keep in mind.
So it kind of sounds like thematically we're saying the toxicity is a lack of trust or a lack of engagement of the employees, which would be the primary cause of toxicity in a work environment. Is that what we're saying, or are there other major factors?
I would think that's probably the number one factor. There may be other factors, one-offs here and there, but I think that's the number one factor.
So Julius, thinking about human-centered engagement as really the primary author of human-centered engagement, I try to take credit. But, utilizing human-centered engagement, how might the CEO kind of approach these whether they're one-on-ones or town halls or this tour, right? What would be an approach using human-centered engagement to do that?
I think it's exactly what Voc and Michelle just said, right? Starting off with listening, right? Starting off with really intently listening, and the fact that you said that you'd be willing to even up to 6 months, right? From one-on-ones to groups, right? Because in order to build trust, right, you got to have some type of connection there, but you're not going to get any connection if you're not listening, right? So that that listening has to take time. And then once you get to a point where integrity, which is essentially what you were talking about, Michelle, right? That's going to allow someone to know, like, okay, now I actually trust, right? So essentially the trust is what's defeating that resistance that we were talking in this, right? Because these employees in this situation were resistant to change, right? They're resistant to, and so only if you're listening, you're intently listening, then once you start to listening, you start to connect with someone because you're like, oh man, they're really connecting. And then you can repeat some of the things that someone said, and not because you just remembered, but because if you're going over 1 or 2, 3 conversations later, and I was able to say, oh, Voc, in our first conversation, you said X, Y, Z, boom, right. Now you're actually connecting with them, and you realize at that point where there's value, right? Because there's something that's happening in the problem, right? That was specifically aligned with your value, right? And then once you understand value, and then there's integrity, there's trust.
And then what happens in that process too? Don't look now. That person who's been listened to feels valued.
Yeah.
Since we're talking about the word value,
Yeah.
now they're valued.
Yep.
There was something, this is bringing to mind something that I was reading about micro stressors. So we think about like layoffs are obviously like that's super stressful, but there's also things that can be related to sort of the structural piece, kind of getting back to that theme we've been having about like human-centered engagement and like organic maybe versus sort of structure. You know, assuming that some of the things you might hear on your listening tour would be about like how some of the structure might not be working, recognizing that humans are hugely impacted by some of those structural things. So one of the things was not having clear understanding about, you know, who's my line of, you know, not just direct report, but who is my work product supposed to be pleasing, you know? Who am I going to be getting feedback from, and like who is where's the area that I'm supposed to point in, I guess is one of those things. Other things like being asked to do things that are sort of against your values. Maybe it isn't in and of itself like immoral, but it's sort of against what really feels good for you in the role that you're playing. You know, those little things, they're little, they're called micro stressors, but add them all up. That does also kind of create the structure for a toxic environment where you can engage personally all you want, but unless those pieces are fixed, we're asking the humans to kind of, you know, pretend that they're going to connect individually, but they're not going to have the environment to thrive.
Sure.
And that's what I think you described your boss doing, was like, okay, what's the container that we can build for you all to thrive?
Not only am I going to listen, remember it, write it down, keep it, and then on top of it, I'm going to do my best to, if we can't do what you guys are asking, I'll try to do my best to meet you guys in the middle so that you guys feel like what you said and what you feel and what you think is valued.
Yeah.
Which it makes you all feel valued.
Absolutely.
You know, I'm going to just throw a wrench in here because I heard it on the radio this morning. I heard Ozzie Guillen talking about the White Sox and their losing streak, right? And Ozzie's like, and sometimes you just can't be their friend, right? And that's right. And so I'm just like, throw the wrench in there, right? So when the performance isn't there, though, right? When the performance isn't there, so it's easy when the performance is there. It's really easy to give more and do more, but what happens when the performance isn't there, right? Like, can we still do? Can we still do these things, or do we have to augment, or is there a third option that maybe people aren't talking about? I won't let the cat out of the bag on what I think.
Well, I mean, there's accountability that's in the mix there, right? But before I go on, Joe, go ahead, because I know you want to talk about this.
I want to hear you go.
Yeah. Well, so that to me, when you start, you can't be their friend. Okay, sure. However, if you speak in terms of a human-centered engagement, if you're able to connect with your player, then you're able to have the type of conversation that can hold them accountable, right? Because you've listened intently to understand what it is that they say, what their challenges were, and whether or not they are putting in the actual effort that they say. Not that you have said, that they say. So it doesn't necessarily have to be you not being their friend. In fact, actually, you are being their friend, right? You're holding them accountable because your friend will hold you accountable. Your real friends will, right? So I think it still boils back down to, at that point, is like, are you connecting with them, right? Are you connecting with them? And it's up to you at that point, as the manager in this case, to be able to rearrange, adjust, because sometimes it's just the flow. Maybe you're forced to make choices, especially like with positions. Maybe there's politics that are involved in it. Right. There can be so-and-so's a third baseman and so-and-so has this type of, social media following, and we get this many fans, right? Therefore, they has to be in the starting lineup, right? So we don't necessarily know all those different dynamics. So I believe, like, when you sometimes you can't be their friend. Maybe what he really means is, like, sometimes you just have to hold them accountable and not accept any excuses to push them past, the level that they know that they can, that they can get to. But that's only going to happen if you understand how to connect with them.
Right. Well, and I think it's that the role, right? My role as coach, my role is not friend, my role is coach. And his role of coach is to get you to the next level, get you past the thing. I want to do it, and I could be in a kind of person that says, I want to do that in a way that's a friend to you, because I know I'll get more out of you if we have a positive relationship versus, if you see me as somebody who's just trying to, like, beat you up when you're, kick you when you're down kind of thing. And then there's people that, would say that's Ozzy's personality, right? Is it when you're down, he's a kick you when you're down kind of person instead of build you up. But he'd say, well, that's because they're quitters, right? Like, I'm kicking them to wake them up, but they keep quitting, right? So it just, I think people feel justified in doing leadership in the way that they feel like it works. But I think there's a third option, right? And that's, Julius, what you're saying, right? Accountability, key, critical. But how do you then, if you really know somebody, right? If you understand those values, meeting that challenge it's a lot easier when you know who you're working with, right? And if it's like, hey, this person is in a space where they're not, for whatever reason, physically, mentally, emotionally, they're not going to cut the mustard. If we're in a contract situation, okay, we're going to just have to suffer through that until they change. Or, with baseball, we'll just use baseball as an example. They put them on the injury list, right? If they're mentally not prepared to play baseball, they can go on the DL, right? And so you can find somebody who might be ready to go. We can't do that in corporate environments. We don't have somebody waiting in the wings that can temporarily take a step in based on the way we do business today, right? Like, mostly it's an employee kind of thing, right? We're not seeking temps because we don't think that's a great fit. Although I would argue that we just don't know how to do it the right way with consultants and people that can come in and help you through a jam, right? So it just, I think there's opportunity for people to rethink what they do and how they do it. So you can provide the support. And if somebody, for whatever reason, right, things happen, right? People lose loved ones, people get sick, right? How can you still keep business going, support the person that needs to be supported, but not worry about having to hold them accountable in a space when they're not able to be accountable, right? And so that's kind of that third option.
Yeah, I think going back into the difference between, like, baseball and then in your general workforce, this is why connecting is so important, because it's up to management to understand what inspires someone, right? There are people who you tell them that they're nothing, then that makes them do more.
Right.
And there are other people who you tell them they're nothing, that will just melt into the ground. So it's really up to connecting and understanding who that person is, right, to get that type of result. And I didn't mean to cut you off earlier, Voc, because you were going to say something, and I don't want to.
So I'm glad you mentioned the whole friend aspect when you're talking about management. So my current manager, I leave him nameless a lot for reasons, but this is, I think, one of the things that makes him even more remarkable. He was able to pull all of this off with us and be our friend, but still, we all understood that he was our manager. We still understand it. He's had to have tough conversations with everyone, not necessarily me.
Superstar.
I'm kidding. No, I'm kidding. A little humor.
It's like,
no, he's had to have tough conversations with everyone. And it could get uncomfortable. He still didn't shy away from it. He attacked it. We still understood who he was. He built this up. He stays consistent. And leaving those tough conversations, I can speak for everyone who's been in his district, and some have gone on to be promoted. Unfortunately, I mean, the first layoff, all of us were retained, the first two. He's lost a few along the way. Everyone walked away still loving this guy and feeling the same way even after the tough conversations. Mm-hmm. And if it was, a tough conversation about maybe something we are doing, because of who he is and how we feel about him, we came away wanting to do better for him.
Yeah. So I love what you just said, because it's not about the friendships. It's about the love. It's about the, respecting each other and creating that environment where that love is just there and present. And when that love's present, the friendships, they're just become natural. Like if you love somebody, you want to make sure you get the best for them, right? You want to communicate with them with the best way possible, but you're not going to let them falter because,
We had layoffs again, unfortunately, beginning of February. 2 people in our district, unfortunately, were let go. One that was fairly new to the district. One that had been there from day one when we all joined with him 6.5 years ago, which was, they're all tough. That one was particularly tough for all of us. He had to, of course, be, as a manager, deliver that news. The next day, he got in his car. He lives in Central Illinois near Springfield. He drove to the southern tip of where this employee lives, which is near Mount Vernon, which is almost Kentucky. Take him out to lunch and give him a hug and spend some time with him.
wow, gosh, that's touching.
And they cried. That's what I'm talking about. That's powerful.
Yeah, and that is totally against the norm. The norm is like, they're gone. You can't talk to them. You can't excommunicate them, right?
Now, I'm not saying names, and I don't know, but that was where the love and the friendship came in, because that's what type of environment he built.
Right.
Family environment.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and we could talk for another hour about like what's possible when you do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know we don't have that time.
Yeah. No, we don't. So let's move into the last segment, which is workplace stories.
We have a couple stories here, right, about a couple different companies that have been intentional and organic, right? And they've both had success, right? So Zapatos, the online shoe retailer, is often cited as a company that intentionally created a positive and fun work culture. I know some people that have worked with them. I could attest to that. So the company CEO invested heavily in company culture, even offering new employees $2,000 to quit if they didn't feel like the company was a good fit.
Wow.
Right. They also prioritize employee happiness by creating a culture committee to organize events and outings, as well as emphasizing the importance of work-life balance. Right. And this is one of the first companies that partnered with redefine.me for their learning. Right. Like, so just like, I know people around this company, they're really trying to do it well. And they're intentional about it. Now, on the other hand, there's a tech company, Atlassian, thank you. I always butcher their name. But they have a reputation for creating a strong and positive company culture, despite not intentionally prioritizing it as a key business objective. This is largely due to their emphasis on transparency, collaboration, and autonomy, which creates a culture of trust and openness, right? And so, although they don't invest the dollars into, what looks like, what we would call like curated events, right? Just their culture itself creates this environment, right? By knowing this, right? They're intentional about it. So it's not by accident that they're transparent. It's not by accident that they're collaborative. It's not by accident that they have autonomy. And that's how they're able to create that trust and openness. So we're seeing these two different companies have two different ways to create a positive culture. Just food for thought for folks is there one specific way, or, maybe there's multiple ways for multiple situations.
Yeah. I mean, I think when listening to that, I think about, there may be too many organizations that are out there saying, well, it'll just happen organically, knowing that there's no commitment to the very foundation that would create that, right? So that's the first thing that kind of came to my head. What about you, Michelle?
Well, I definitely think that there can be and should be multiple ways, as long as it's authentic to the people running the company. Because I think if you had the people who are running Atlassian operating like just following the rule sheet for Zappos, it doesn't sound like they are fundamentally like the same guys or gals. It has to be authentic. So, the concept of one right way, I bristle at that sometimes, even though I have my favorites that I think work best. But I think it does come down to, it has to be authentic and an expression of the people who are in charge of the company.
I'm going to bounce this to you too, though, Voc, because you guys did something that was pretty interesting, which was you actually created a work culture guide. That's kind of what you described, right? And
roadmap for our district, like, what we would like to see. I don't want to say expected, because expectations I don't think really were there. But what we would like to see, some things, and we also put some things down in relation to how we were going to be towards each other as teammates. Even though we don't work directly with each other, we all have our own territories. But at times we still cross over with little things. So how are we going to treat each other? Things like that. So we touched on different topics, and wrote everything down, and we created our own little roadmap and our trying to remember the name of it. It's like a mission statement we had. Mm-hmm. Get me to repeat the whole thing right now because it was 6 years ago or so. But yeah. I know he has it all still at home with him, and he has everything he wrote down, and he put it into a document. And from time to time, he'll kind of put it up on the screen at a meeting. In fact, we have a meeting in a couple of weeks that I wouldn't be surprised if he brings it out, because now we have a new teammate on our team. So I'm sure he will. Mm-hmm. So
nice. Yeah. Okay. Well, Joe, anything?
I just Voc, I've heard about you for a couple years now. I feel like maybe at least a year. I'm just thrilled to finally be able to meet you.
Pleasure's all mine.
this topic and what you were able to bring to it. It was just awesome, and look forward to future conversations.
I'm looking forward to it the same way. This is awesome. This is a great conversation, and I hope more companies. Let me take that back. I hope more managers really tap into this, because I'd be lying to say our entire company operates like this. It's not. I know our district, our one little entity does. And there's other managers that I'm sure, and he's relayed that to me, that look at him and think he's crazy for how he manages us. Some of them have called us spoiled, like he's a parent and spoiling his kids, and not looking at the results he's getting. And then when he gets the results, some of them are over in the corner, kind of upset about it. Like, how, that's just not right. How can he manage like that? And then he's on top and his name's in lights and he's doing well. And the term to call haters. Get haters over there looking at it like that. And it sucks. But if more managers can tap in, and I'll say and use this word because he totally had it from the very beginning, the courage to go against the norm, to break away from tradition and what management is like, and do things a certain way to create a trust and a buy-in from your team, and then stay consistent with it to continue to build that trust in the environment, it'll start to, I think, trickle down, because he's had his effect on a few other managers.
Nice. Michelle, last words. What'd you take away from today?
Oh my gosh, so many things running through my mind. Thanks again, Voc. This was a great conversation. I think we've established there are some great pockets within pharma that are working well. So just to have a little counter narrative there. And I'm sure that's true for lots of other big businesses. Essentially pharma businesses are big businesses. And so those small pockets, I think, are our hope, showing that it works, and then inspiring other managers to take a look and say, oh, wait a second, I want some of that. So, yeah, great to talk to you today.
Awesome. Joe, last words?
Already had them.
Okay, great. Well, I guess I'll end with, today I guess we realized that there are multiple ways to create a positive work culture. I think that it's still a minority. We don't hear, as what we're finding, we don't hear as many stories like yours, the experience that employees or workers are having with, their management. So thank you for sharing all that. And I think more management, more companies should really, really reach out and put that as a priority. Because if you can, based on this conversation, if you can build trust and connect with the people who are responsible for making your life easier, then they will. So that concludes our episode. Thank you, everyone, for listening to Workplace Theater. And it's been a great conversation. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome.
See you next time.
Till soon.
If today's discussion resonated with you, don't miss out. Hit the subscribe button now, leave a review, and rate Workplace Theater. Your support helps us improve. Do you have questions or comments? Click the link in our show notes. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for tuning into the Workplace Theater.
We hope you've enjoyed our podcast. If you're interested in new ways to inspire your team, need help with a sticky workplace situation, or you'd like a communication and engagement strategy for an upcoming important objective, please contact us by emailing workplacetheater@gmail.com. This has been a Working Better Together experience, a division of Exponential Consulting, LLC.